It's like you're in a low budget play and you hear about all the action through this single character, but you're not out there because no one has the money to build the sets for it. So you just all have to experience it through this one person, like receiving letters from the outside. Oh, the war is going on. And yeah, this has been my office. It's been whatever venue I've put it as. It's been a podcast studio. It's been a funeral parlor because I went to a Zoom funeral recently. It's like all in this one space.
Hello and welcome to Freelance Pod. My name's Chandrika and I'll be your host. So yeah, it's been quite a while since I said those words. I haven't made an episode of Freelance Pod since last summer, the height of the lockdown. And to be honest, for a little while I didn't know what the future of the podcast would be. I did say on social media that I was thinking of closing it down. But I've had a change of heart, and I think it goes along with me understanding the pivot that's recently happened in my career. So to go back a bit and give you some context, in January 2020, do you remember that? It was 500 years ago. I did a stand-up comedy course at the Bill Murray pub in Islington in London. And trying out comedy was something I'd always wanted to do, but had perhaps not given myself permission to, had told myself that I didn't have time for a hobby and all of this stuff. Where would it go? What would it even do for me? But I think podcasting itself had really convinced me to give it a try. And so I did this course. It was 6 weeks long and it was great. I really enjoyed it. And we had to do a show at the end of it, 5-minute long set in the Bill Murray, which has 2 rooms, one which is a bar and one which is like a proper like New York comedy club basement. And I did my set and it was really fun. And the video of that set led me into some competitions, helped me get some work. And in a year that's been quite bad for live comedy and been really tough on comedians who make most of their livelihood from comedy, I did find some few little spaces here and there to kind of edge in as a complete newbie. And I've really enjoyed all of that. And another thing that I found about comedy and the industry is that comedians are very friendly and really generous. And the beauty of social media and Zoom and various things like the Angel Comedy Gym and other events run by funny women and other groups, the beauty of those is that you can still meet people even during the pandemic and get to know people. And that is how I've met today's guest on this episode, who I'll introduce in a minute. And so the pandemic and the lockdown has had its effect on my career and what I'm interested in. And I've decided to bring back the podcast with a sort of comedy-focused angle. I'll be interviewing comedians and trying to learn more about the industry as I go along. So hopefully you're up for hearing those sorts of episodes. And as always, like, feedback is welcome. The social media is always the same. And the newsletter's still going. It's called Writing by Moonlight now, and it's on button-down email. So if you've not noticed that change and you want to subscribe, it's button down, so the word button and down, all in one word, .email/Chandrika, my first name. So buttondown.email/Chandrika. My newsletter has migrated there. I've moved away from Substack. And love to hear your feedback. And I've got some exciting comedy news of my own as well. So for the first time in my life, I am taking a solo 1 hour long show to a fringe. I'm going to Brighton and Camden fringes this year. So my dates at Brighton are the 8th and 9th of June, which is about a month away. I'm on at 6:45 p.m. each day at the Cavendish Arms. And the show is called I Miss Amy Winehouse. So it's about that, because it's 10 years since she died, and that seems a ridiculous amount of time. And so we really go back to the noughties and to Camden at that period, and we see what I was up to working in Camden and partying there as well, hoping that I would bump into Amy, which I never did. Or did I? You'll have to see the show to find out. So that'll be a work in progress at Brighton. I'm hoping to find some slots in London to work on the work in progress in June and July. And then first week of August, the 3rd to the 7th, the show will be at the Camden Fringe. I've got a space at the Etc. Theatre, which is above a pub on Camden High Street. It's like one of your classic black box theatres in Camden. And that'll be a bit more of a theatrical show. with more visuals and props and things planned for that one. So yeah, I hope you can come along to one of those. I'll put all the details in the show notes as ever. And I'm excited and daunted, and I need to get writing ASAP. So on to this episode's guest, we have Vix Leyton. So Vix is a PR, and in the last few years she took up comedy, and she's also a comedy promoter running her own nights. And she even has her own podcast, The Comedy Arcade. And this is like a panel show where she invites on 3 other comedians and they compete to tell the most outrageous story about a certain subject in 3 rounds. And it is such a funny podcast. I met Vix through a Funny Women event online and got to know her over social media and through chatting for this pod. And she's just got such a positive, like, if you don't ask, you don't get kind of attitude to life. So a no won't kill you, as she says. Always try, always go for it. And yeah, she's got loads of great advice around comedy, around self-promotion. We laughed a lot through this. Here's Vix Leyton.
I'm Vix Leyton. I am a senior content marketer by day and a comedian, promoter and podcaster in all the other hours. I started doing comedy because I wanted to get over a fear of public speaking. So I never had any ambitions to do comedy, or as far as I knew, I didn't have any ambitions to do comedy. I was sick of going to conferences and complaining about all the male speakers, but then being too chicken to speak myself. I never put myself forward. When I was occasionally asked, I turned it down. I always had a good reason, but the reason was I was really scared. Proper psychosomatic symptom triggering scared. I could make myself sick before standing in front of a company update just out of the anxiety of it. So I needed to get over that. I wanted to be the change that I was demanding in the world. So I did this Funny Women course. It was like a half-day course called Stand Up to Stand Out. And it was basically geared towards if you're interested in comedy, or also if you want to use more aspects of comedy in your workplace or get a bit more confidence. So I thought, this looks like a bit of me. This looks not too scary. And it was expensive enough that I thought I wouldn't dismiss it on the morning, but not so expensive that if I did find I couldn't do it, I would be really, really annoyed with myself. So it was like, yeah, exactly what I needed in the right place at the right time. So that's how all of this sort of dual career, I think I'm glorifying it, calling it 2 careers.
Oh, I don't think so. No.
But yeah, so I did the course, and at the end of it, I was no less scared, really, but I pushed myself and I hadn't died, and I'd really enjoyed it. So I'd enjoyed the little task that I'd done. I'd enjoyed putting on the performance, and I used to be a real show off. I used to love that. And somewhere along the line, it stopped, and I never worked out. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I've never worked out where that stopped. Like when it became something that I didn't want to do, and that escalated like Japanese knotweed to something that I physically felt incapable of doing. There was no big moment. I didn't stand on a rostrum to make a speech and my trousers fell down. I have no idea how that happens. And I guess it's the nature of mental health. You'll never know. It might not even have anything to do with public speaking. It might be a kind of rich mix of other things. But I tweeted about it. That's what I like to do. When I need to be held to account, I throw it out to the Twitter universe and make it everybody's problem. And Mark Watson tweeted back, the comedian, and he was doing a 26-hour show. And he said, do you want to learn stand-up over 26 hours for charity? Are you really serious about getting over this? I'll help you. And yeah, I did. I went and did it, and it was scary, and it pushed my comfort zones in a lot of ways, because I'm not somebody who prior to comedy would have even gone to the cinema on my own. I don't know what it is. I just wasn't somebody who was ever comfortable. I would never, before it became something that I did in work, I'd never take myself to the pub and have a drink on my own. I would be the person that would wait outside until a friend arrived to walk in until I started doing PR, because I was just quite a socially anxious person. But yeah, committing to 26 hours in my own company in a room full of strangers didn't sound like something I'd ever be able to do. And then when I came out of that day and I'd done that as well, then I felt like, well, the world is my oyster. It was like another path that kind of dimly lit up like a computer game. But it was something I wanted to pursue. And I thought it'll be a great thing to have an interest alongside my job that can take me away from that. And maybe it'll mean I'll finish work on time, because I have to finish work on time because I've got a solid plan. I've got somewhere I have to be. So
how did the 26 hours work? Did they let you sleep?
Well, technically, like this is like Mark Watson's thing. He does these long shows, and it's almost like exercise in pushing yourself to the limit. So most of the people in the room did attempt to stay up for the full 24 hours. So it was from 9 o'clock at night through to, I think, 11 o'clock the day after in the evening. And it's something that it's got its own following. So a lot of the people that were at that show had done 4 or 5 or 6 or all of the others. So it was an endurance exercise, but they were all in on it. And there was something really fun about doing that, about pushing yourself to the limit. But I was called up on stage as part of, he had so many challenges going on. So somebody was playing all of the Beatles songs, like busking every single Beatles song in a room. There were some people playing Countdown for 24 hours. There were people doing physical things, sponsored walks, sponsored runs. And mine was like quite flimsy compared to a lot of the labours of other people, but psychologically probably as big.
I think people who haven't done stand-up they're always very impressed by it. And always, there's a psychological leap involved for a lot of people, I think, because that's a reaction I get a lot. And I do get it. I weirdly don't really get nerves before I speak in public. I've never had a problem with that. But
I think that's no bad thing.
No, it's no bad thing, but it's odd, I suppose. And then I definitely have that chemical reaction though when you're not yourself completely up there, and then you literally come down and you have a come down.
Where I was, it was very much you made your alliances, your media relations alliances, typically at the bar, at awards dues. That was the way that you marked yourself out amongst hundreds of other PRs. You had to be the most fun or the most interesting. If you couldn't be the most useful, there were other ways of building those relationships. And I think that's where the storytelling really, it was based in that. I think the reason that once I got over the white noise fear of the actual public speaking itself, I found I had quite a lot of material, because when you're used to networking and going into rooms where you don't necessarily know anybody, the quickest way to break the ice is to maybe bring up an anecdote that's self-contained so everybody feels comfortable and then they can jump in and talk to you. So I really had a proper little dossier of these that I'd use either on lunches, again with journalists that you've never met before. Part of the media relations, you'd have to invite people out and you would never know how it went. And sometimes it was like a bad date and you have to pay and you have to stay as long as they want. You can't walk away from it. And at the end of the bad date, you have to tell them it was amazing and then ring them up again in 6 weeks and do exactly the same thing. Do you want to do that?
Stay in a relationship with them. Yeah.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah, like these fun events, the PRs were always on. That's the thing that was their job. And as journalists, it was like, well, we could drink, we could take advantage of the fun stuff. But yeah, like if we were drunk and needed a cab, who was getting it for us? You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's tough actually. And
it does give you the skills. And I think in terms of leveling up, going through the ranks of open mic, it was those skills that saw me well. Before I had a solid 5 minutes, what I did have was I was interested in talking to the promoter. I was interested in hearing about their experiences and it's not in a disingenuous way, but I've kind of been trained to. I've been trained to be interested in people, to ask questions. I always stay around because if you're a PR in an event, you're usually either running it or you are considerate of whoever else is running it. So I'd be at the end, like stacking the chairs with them or going, can I buy you a drink? And it goes a long way. It goes a long way for people who are putting in a lot of work to have that recognised. I think it went a long way with people. And then they were a lot more supportive of me in terms of giving me stage time, even though I wasn't necessarily ready for it. So it was, it worked out all right in those terms. It just felt like a natural thing. It's just politeness. Like I'd follow up after gigs and just say, thank you so much for having me, which I don't think everyone does. But it just seems
long
like
hours, aren't they? Yeah, you're right. I think promoters again have this kind of, people have a certain image of them, but just like their jobs are quite hard and quite lonely. And
it's so hard because because I run nights now and it's so much work and you don't, I much prefer to rock up and do my 10 minutes than run the night and worry about, is it on time? Are people enjoying it? If they don't get back from the break at the right time, then people might run late and then they won't be able to travel home, which means someone might get up during the headliner. There's so much to consider. Yeah. And people are not always respectful of time because everybody lives in their own universe. So you'd have people pull out at the last minute and you had to be like, well, that's fine. But it's not fine. So I really, I feel for all of the ones that were pre-lockdown, plugging away to keep doing that, because it, in a lot of ways, it can be quite thankless. The nights are a joy, though. Putting on the nights when the acts have a good time, the audience have a good time, it's worth all the work then. And then it strips away all the, oh, why don't I just turn up at other people's nights? Why do I do this to myself? It's always worth it. And I'll always say to my husband, like, if there's a particularly difficult one where it hasn't sold to the last minute, or if there's been a lot of change, I'll say to my husband, right, this is the last one I'm doing. just gonna be an act now. I don't need to be a promoter. That's too much stuff. And then by the end of the night, I've already booked in. I'm already talking to the acts going, right, we do this every fortnight, so I'll have you back.
What is your club night and where is it? In normal times and Zoom times?
Well, I've got one that's local to me that I started by accident because, like a lot of things, I was drunk in the pub and I spotted a room upstairs in my local.
Oh, yeah.
That looked like it could have comedy in it. So rocked up to the bar person and said, I think you should do a comedy night here. And they got the diary out and went, okay, when?
Makes sense, doesn't it? People love comedy, bringing money.
But I was only like a few months into doing comedy myself. Yeah. But I sort of had this idea in my head that I wanted to create the kind of comedy night that I wanted to go to, that was easy and safe to get to for women, where the toilet facilities were nice, which sounds ridiculous, but comedy's a hustle. So a lot of the rooms that open mic promoters can get will be in pubs that aren't necessarily central because they don't get the footfall and they need something like an open mic. But because of that, you'll find yourself in like the dark streets of Dalston that you would never have set foot in before, going into a pub that looks like the start of a crime drama. It's like if you saw Kate from Line of Duty outside this pub, you'd know they were finding a body, and you had to go in by yourself, pass through the pub, go downstairs into a basement or upstairs into a top room and just hope for the best. So I'd already done quite a lot of that in that first few months because I committed to doing 100 gigs in a year to prove a petty point to somebody who said that was the only time you could call yourself a comedian. So I was doing loads of gigging, and then having my own night made sense because I could put it on as many times as I want and up my count to get to my 100. So when the barwoman said, yep, let's do it, I drunkenly DM'd Jen Brister, who I'd met a couple of times, who I absolutely loved, and said, do you want to come and headline this night? I want to make it really nice for women. And she said yes. And we found a date and made it work. So that was live at Limehouse. We managed to run outside of the lockdowns last year. So we did some garden gigs and then some socially distanced gigs there over the summer, which was an absolute joy. I also co-run with my friend Jess Ashkenazi one in Angel called Comedy Kiss. So that's a really nice one as well. But that's a different arena because the pub's still open and it's technically a designated space, but it's an L shape and people are in the pub on the other side, which is
that's tough.
It's a weird vibe, that one, but it's a lovely room. And it's got staging and it's got all the sound system in, so you just turn up, which is lovely because the Limehouse pub, I have to take my little amplifier on wheels down on a trolley every time and then bring it back. And I've run one in Cardiff as well called Live at Big Moose, which is in a lovely non-for-profit cafe in the centre of Cardiff, because Wales's comedy scene is incredible. And I was jealous that I wasn't part of it and I wanted to be in on it because I'm from Cardiff and I saw what was going on there and I wanted in. So I couldn't get in via normal means because they didn't want to book someone who'd have to come all the way down to London for an unpaid gig. And also there were plenty of people local to South Wales that could do that. So I was applying for nights, not getting anywhere. So again, I thought, put my own on then, why not? And that was absolutely gorgeous as well. It's a really lovely night. Wales is absolutely killing it for comedy at the moment. Over the summer, particularly since lockdown, it's never been more apparent like how generous comedians have been with their time. Because when it first kicked in, I'd just done my 100th gig and I was really excited and I got a room for Fringe and I was talking a good game about it, and everyone who's done their first Fringe and everyone who's a bit more senior in comedy knew it was probably going to be atrocious, but everyone was so supportive and like, yeah, you're going to love it. And I was gutted then, like everybody else was, when it didn't go ahead. But in the grand scheme of what was happening to comedy, it felt like a very small thing. And I felt like I couldn't complain that my open mic career had got curtailed by it. But it was so lovely. Yeah, but you know, it's one of those things, isn't it? You never know. Your problems don't get smaller because other people have got bigger ones. But at the same time,
It's their livelihoods.
There's such a huge difference. I still had my day job. It was just emotionally bereft rather than worrying about what my next salary was going to look like. So I didn't feel great about complaining about any of that, but it started to itch at me a couple of months into the lockdown when it became clear that nothing was going to go back to normal. And I messaged a few of them, said, will you come and talk to me on my Instagram live about comedy? I still want to learn, even though there aren't any stages to be on. I'd love to learn from your experiences. Can you come and talk to me about what it's like for you? And so many said yes. I think everybody I asked said yes. And they were all fully prepared to give up their hour of their time to a very new comedian with like no expectation of anything in return, really. And that kind of generosity I've just seen from the first minute I started right the way through to now. There's a lot of keenness, particularly I think with women comedians, there's a lot of keenness to send the ladder down and bring as many people up as you can. With Edinburgh Fringe coming up, you wonder how many people can afford to do it now versus last year.
Are you planning to go to Edinburgh this year? Or
I don't know what it looks like. And I don't think it's a funny one, isn't it? Because again, it depends on who you are as a person. I don't know if I'd want to take up space for somebody else who had something legitimate to sell that they felt would genuinely help them advance along, other than me just doing it because it's a milestone on the journey that I want to pass. And I don't think I've got a show that's ready necessarily. Because
tough after this last year, isn't it? A lot of people have mentioned that. What do I write after this year? And it's hard.
Because nobody wants 100 shows about COVID. Everybody on Twitter is very quick to say, but also that's the one defining experience that everyone can relate to. So to leave it out doesn't feel right either. And I'll be really interested to see the mix of that in terms of what people do with the experience and how they tell it. But my show all of a sudden does feel quite trivial in the grand scheme of what the world has faced, because it was all about pettiness. So Think I can still do it, but I think it needs a lot of recalibrating.
I think everyone like telling. I think pettiness is quite a universal.
People in parks taking pictures of other people's in parks, going, "I can't believe these people are in the park." It's like, you're there, you're in the park as well.
That's the weirdest one.
It's an exercise in people's main character syndrome, isn't it? You can rationalize anything when it's you, but you cannot apply that to other people. It's like, oh, it's fine that I'm out because I know I'm keeping 2 meters away from people. And I'm pretty sure I had COVID back in January, but you don't know anybody else's story and you're not willing to apply it. It's just, I'm the main character here. Of course I'm at the park. Why would I not be at the park? This is about me. I've experienced so much in this room and nothing feels real anymore because of that. It's like you're in a low budget play and you hear about all the action through this single character, but you're not out there because no one has the money to build the sets for it. So you just all have to experience it through this one person, like receiving letters from the outside. Oh, the war is going on. And this has been my office. It's been whatever venue I've put it as. It's been a podcast studio. It's been a funeral parlor because I went to a Zoom funeral recently. It's like all in this one space.
Yeah, this flattening of experience and existence is really odd, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like never been more intense, but also never been more remote in terms of how I felt about things. Like little things have become volcanic, but also things that would be big milestones because they're experienced through the same screen as everything else just don't feel like they've got the same meaning, which is, I guess, I would hope a lot of people feel the same. Yeah, the Comedy Arcade. So it's a panel show. 3 funny people, not always comedians, compete to tell their best stories around random topics. So that came about from those conversations I had on Instagram, because I really enjoyed asking comedians questions that I hadn't heard them answer before. Because when you're a fan of somebody, it's very easy to fall into listening to them on the same sort of podcast. So if they were comedy podcasts, they were always asked, how did you get into comedy? What's the worst heckle you've ever had? And I was like, I want to know something else. I want to know what you were like at school. I want to know all these things. And that's kind of how the idea for the show came about. But
and with that slight competitive element of there are other people here who are going to be answering it as well. So go big.
And chipping in.
Yeah.
So the conversations that they've that they've inspired are conversations that probably would have never happened with people that would never necessarily have been together to have them. And each episode, some of them have got really, really different vibes. So when we had Robin Ince on, it was very literary focused. We talked about the way that media skews events, whereas we had a really girly one where it was Shappy, Elijah Arden and Suze Kempner. And it was almost like this beautiful, empowering support group where all the stories were met with love and, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. It was so much. Yeah, it's so different every episode. I had one recently with Alice Fraser and Shazia Mirza, and Shazia was talking about how she was a bit of a tearaway as a kid and was sent to Catholic school by her Muslim parents to try and straighten her out, and her experience of that, which you wouldn't necessarily expect to hear on a comedy panel show, but it was fascinating. And Alice Fraser was talking about how she approaches things that have become problematic in later life. So things like Grease. Like if you wanted to pick through the film Grease, it could be cancelled a million times over. But if you treat yourself as a time traveler that's just going along and seeing it for what it is, you can kind of reconcile it with yourself. So I did not expect the conversation to get that deep.
What do you think about the whole side of having to have more of a public persona with your job, I suppose, and the self-promotion side?
Well, I lived in South Wales when I first started in PR, and most of the national journalists I needed to deal with were in London. So all I really had was email and what was relatively new at the time, Twitter. And so I did build a personality there. I was chipping in on the conversations. I wanted people to know that I knew my stuff. I was making sure I was sharing the right things. So I started curating a version of myself back then. Mark Watson, I was only on his Twitter feed because I got involved in a conversation with him and Katie Brand when everybody was talking about all the tropes that you see in movies. So it's like, I'm a London PR. You'll know me because I'm wearing brand new wellies and I've been sent out to a remote island to do some PR for a corporate, but I will fall in love with a scruffy farmer and change my whole perspective on life. And me, Katie Brand and him wrote this whole story for this hapless PR girl who's gone up to like the Outer Hebrides. And both Katie Brand and Mark Watson started following me off the back of that.
Yeah.
And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have got onto the 26-hour show. None of this would have happened. And I found a lot of positives from being on Twitter. I think it opens my mind. I don't agree that you have to be exposed to everything, because I know people say there's a danger in creating your own little echo chamber where everybody agrees with you. I think that I don't consider it an echo chamber because things do get through, but I think it's fine to create a space that you're happy in.
So tell us about the Cavs then.
Oh, hello. Yes, it's me. Just wanted to say, when we talk about the Cavs, in this bit of the conversation, I should have explained it. We were talking about the Cavendish Arms, which is a pub in Stockwell in South London, and they hold a comedy night called Comedy Virgins, and it's kind of an institution for newbie kind of comedians. And at the time that Vix and I were speaking, I was just about to enter a competition they were running to get a 5-minute spot with pro comedians at the Cambridge Comedy Festival in July. Unfortunately, I was knocked out and didn't make it through to the last 12, but the competition is going on. But you can watch the show. It runs a couple of times a week on the Comedy Virgins Facebook page. So look that up and you can watch a Facebook live video a couple of evenings a week to see who gets to win. So that's what we're talking about here.
Oh, I've got involved with them because they were advertising their new Comedian of the Year competition, and they got in touch with me because I've become recognised by the industry as somebody who is a flagrant self-promoter. So
there's no shame around self-promotion.
No, I'm happy to share the secrets, and I think I'd love debunking the myth that it's too opaque and it's too hard, or you have to pay £3,000 for a PR to get your story out. Because as you've touched upon, anyone can pitch an editor anything now. There's never been so much access. So I did a story for the Independent Voices recently, which is my first ever byline on comedy, because I've been following the Voices editor for a long time, because I had something of an online relationship with her. I felt brave enough to pitch some stuff and I got commissioned and I got to write about the thing that I love. So Shirley at the Cav said, do you know any ways we could promote this? Are there any journalists you know? So I thought, I really love them. I was not in a position necessarily to support them when they did their crowdfunder last summer to stay open, and I wanted to pay it forward. So I said, look, let me pick this up and try and help you. So I put together the headliners program with them to make sure that we had a pro on each night to encourage people to tune in, and it was brilliant. The numbers were great. There were like over 100 people on them, which for a free Facebook comedy night is pretty special. And yeah, put a press release together, sent it out, got some coverage. And it was just a really lovely competition to see new talent, people who had started, who loved the idea of stand-up so much, had never put a foot on stage and was still trying to make it work in lockdown. Like they've only ever done stand-up in their bedrooms and they were killing it. It really lit a fire under me. It's like, yeah, if you want it enough, you can go out and get it. But they really felt strongly they wanted to do the competition online because they knew it was something like, it is another rite of passage for comedians, because you shout about it a lot if you've been a finalist or a semi-finalist. It's a nice accolade to have. And it was one of the probably more inclusive ones on the map. There was no barrier to entry. And I think that's what the Cav does well. They don't cherry pick the acts that they know will go down well with the audience. It's a completely open book. You could be doing your first gig, you could be doing your 100th gig. You've got as much of a shot as getting on the stage as everybody else. So they made the competition work and I stayed in touch with them. And yeah, I'm really enjoying working with them and they've just been brilliant. So what they've done to kit the Cav out, the tech they've got is extraordinary. They've really doubled down investing to make sure that you can have as close to a stage experience as they can get it. And they're working it now so you can go and perform in the Cav to a Zoom audience. So I did that a couple of weeks ago with a new material night. The difference it makes being on a stage behind a microphone is unreal. I never wanted to be the one that set that up in my house. I just couldn't. I admire the people that can do it. For me, that is a cringe level too far. Setting my mic stand up in the kitchen next to my fruit bowl, it's not for me. So yeah, I just admire everything they've done. And everything they've done is wholeheartedly to keep comedy going. They could have just offered the space out to pro comedians to use because the tech setup is brilliant. So pro comedians would want to use it, but they've kept it really pure and really true to whoever wants to go can step up and have a go. So they have got together a Cambridge Comedy Festival to create some stage space for brand new comics alongside all the pros. So they're running a competition to give that space to somebody to be 5 minutes on a pro stage in front of what is going to be an extraordinary crowd. So it's just so cool. And those are the kind of things that you don't forget. And they're the kind of opportunities that everybody who's new needs, because there are some people that are ready quicker than everybody else as well. And you know it when you see it. There's nothing more galling, but also more inspiring than when you see someone who absolutely kills their sets. And then at the end, the MC comes on and says, and that was their 4th gig. You're like, what? But I'm excited. So I'm excited to see you. I'm going to be there on Tuesday.
So can we have your 3 top tips?
Yeah. So the first thing is no never kills you. Unless it's no, I can't give you this kidney or I can't give you this life-saving treatment. Like, no, if you ask to be on a bill, if you ask to be on a podcast, getting left on red or getting a no back, you're going to be fine. And they might say yes. And that's really exciting. So I've got to do loads of gigs that a lot of people wouldn't even have bothered trying for. And I shouldn't have probably bothered trying for. And they had space that day, or someone dropped out, or for whatever reason, they liked the look of my Instagram and the stuff that I've been working on, I got in. So if there's something that you feel like you're a good fit for podcast wise or comedy wise, if you're a comedian or anything, a job. So I once rejected a rejection for a job that I emailed them my CV and my covering letter, and they said that other candidates had more experience than me, so didn't give me an interview. I emailed them back and said, I disagree. Look at my experience again. And the guy rang me back and said, you're absolutely right. We didn't look far enough down your CV. And I got to interview with them. I didn't get the job, but what was the worst that could happen? They'd already said no to me. So there was no risk in taking a punt and going, I disagree with you. I want this job.
And the more you push back like that and get a response like that, it really builds you up. That's brilliant.
Same with like asking for a pay rise and asking for more money when you've got a new job on. Like I did that once years ago, sweating. I think my arse was sweating and I didn't know my arse cheeks could sweat. And I did it because I got offered a promotion, but with a woeful salary increase. And in a fit of pettiness and stress, I emailed the finance director and said, I want to talk to you about this, went along with a load of evidence that I thought I was worth more than that. And I got the pay rise. And I learned a lesson then, because he could have said no and I would have walked away, no worse off. But they actually respected that I'd done it. And they said that. And then I was able to tell loads of other people that had got the meager pay rise to go and do it as well. So I became like a one-person union at that place I was working. So yeah, no, never kills anybody. If it's something that you think's for you, give it a go. Take the shot. You don't have to choose a career. So a lot of people talk to me about when I'm going to leave PR behind for comedy. I don't think I ever will. There might be a day where I do more comedy-based PR, or maybe I'll do more entertainment PR alongside the promoting and the comedy stuff. I love doing both. I love the freedom of what I'm doing in the new space that I never dreamed I could be able to do. And also I love the thing that I've built. I've been building this career over 12 years, and the skills that I've learned in that career have been applicable to everything that I've done in my life. And I think I would be poorer as a comedian trying to make it without it. And similarly, I think I'm better as a PR because of the comedy, because I've got this other interest. I've got this reason to switch off, but I've also got the confidence that I didn't have before to speak up, to present, to put myself forward for things that people respect that. They respect that new energy. So I think it's really enriched me in that way. And also, don't think you haven't got time to do something that you love. So I would have told you, like we said at the start, I would have told you I didn't have time for roller derby. I think was the last thing that I thought could be my thing. And it was 2 hours twice a week. And I was so focused on my career at the time and my downtime that I didn't think I had time to do that. And I now probably do about 15 hours of comedy and comedy admin on top of my full-time job. And I don't even feel it. And it's like, I hate that phrase, oh, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I disagree with that. I don't mind, though. I don't mind putting in the work because it's worth it. And I think if I'd known how much it's going to take over my life, I might not have gone to that Funny Women session. Because if someone had told me this is the way that it was going to go, I would have found that stressful and overwhelming. But I'm glad I took that single step. And I think it's Sophie Hagen that said, I don't know if it's in their book or not, about going to the gym. People get into their heads about going to the gym, about people looking at them. And their advice was just go to the gym. You don't have to stay there. Just go to the door. If you get to the door and that's as far as you want to go, you can walk away. Go to the machine. If you don't want to go on the machine, you can just walk away at any time. So keep that in mind. Like, don't take the first step because you've already decided what's going to happen in a year, what's going to happen in 2 years' time, because you genuinely don't know. If someone had told me when I made that New Year's resolution to do the speaking course so I could be a better corporate speaker, that 2 years later I would be doing a podcast, trying to find stage time all over the UK, I would have laughed in your face. So if there's something you think that you might want to do, it's similar to the second point, don't overthink it, take the step. Because you can always take the step back. Nothing is set in stone.
Well, thanks so much to Vix Leyton for being my guest on the new revived Freelance Pod. It was so much fun to talk about comedy and to hear about someone else's route into it and how they make it work with their day job. Thanks for sticking with this podcast despite the long absence. I hope you enjoyed this episode. The socials are all the same as ever. I've got them all down in the show notes. Yeah, that's it from me for this episode. There are going to be a few more, so look out for them. And speak to you next time. Bye.